If I had a crystal ball and I could look into this crystal ball and tell you guys exactly where your business opportunities lie looking forward, what is working in the future, what is not working in the future, things that we should totally eliminate, things that we should totally start doing in order to see your business grow and flourish. Imagine how amazing that would be. Guys, I don't have a crystal ball, but I do have the next best thing. We've recently just launched our opportunity analysis, and the entire premise of this exercise is to help you guys understand where the holes in your bucket currently lie. Why is that important? Because we don't want to start filling a bucket that's leaking. Guys, for a limited time only, I'm going to be offering this as a free giveaway. It's $350, but for you site shedders, you're going to get it for free. You need to head across to tradie.wiki/grow and enter the code SiteShed to get it for nothing. Off the back of it, book a time to have a chat and we'll see where it takes us. We're looking forward to helping you and seeing where your opportunities lie. Today's podcast has been proudly brought to you by Tradie Web Guys. Tradie Web Guys work with tradespeople only on their websites and marketing solutions to help them stand out from their competition. Everything from web design through to SEO, search engine marketing, content creation, you name it, guys. It is a customized solution for trade-based organizations and it's fantastic. Head across to tradiewebguys.com.au/apply, fill in the form and let's have a conversation.
Giving tradies and contractors around the globe the tools to run a modern business. You're listening to Toolbox Talks from the Site Shed. Now here's your host, Matt Jones.
Walter, welcome to the Site Shed podcast.
Thank you, Matt. It's good to be here with you.
A new author of The Red Flags.
Yes, I'm author of the book Think Red Flags, a proactive and profitable approach for your small business.
How cool. And is that your first book, Walter?
Yeah, it is. It is my first book. I spent my entire career as a small business owner. And this is a process that we use that made us very, very successful and very profitable company. Right. And when I sold my company about 3 years ago, I just didn't want that information to go silent.
Sure. And I think you are definitely preaching to the choir here because there is a lot of conversations in our community around succession planning, selling a business, building a business so that it can be sold. We've done a number of podcasts in the past on similar topics, so I'm sure this is going to get some very good feedback. People are always wanting to learn, just like you said, how can they pass that legacy on, and how can they keep their baby alive beyond themselves. So what was that business, Walter? Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into that.
I started at a very young age being introduced to the idea of owning a business. My father had 3 businesses. I grew up in a small town in Virginia. And let me just preface something here. I'd like to talk about my background in this regard because I want your listeners to see that there's a common thread between people like me. There's nothing so unique. Yes, I was able to enjoy a very high level of success in my business, but there's nothing unique about my experience. I started working in my father's businesses. He had 3 small businesses in a 30,000 population town in Virginia. So my introduction was very early, where I'd learned to provide a service or goods and receive compensation, thereby earning a profit. Mm-hmm. So that was the orientation. But I think that most of us, and especially your listeners, if they look back into their experience, they'll find that there's some common thread there. Maybe they had a paper route. Maybe they cut lawns in their community, but it's something that was done with the intention of providing a service or a product and receiving compensation for it.
Sure. You know what I honestly feel, though, perhaps the missing link for a lot of people may be, and the difference may be, is having that mentor like you had with your father. And I mean, I know growing up, I did the paper run, do that kind of stuff myself, but I never really had a mentor as such, which could steer me and equip me for that sort of business knowledge. So I think that could be a big difference.
Well, that could be that there is some difference there, but I think that the mentors that probably contributed most to my business were people that I met in later years.
Sure, without a doubt.
I traveled from California, from Virginia to California. I worked my way across country. It took 3 months to do it. I met some incredibly wonderful people. I have, I am so positive about the goodness of people because there were people that gave me a place to stay when I had none. There were owners of businesses that gave me jobs when it really wasn't necessary for them to do it. So I don't claim that I did all this on my own.
I think you live in a country with some of the friendliest people on earth. I have a very similar experience living in America. When I just landed and I was moving to Aspen in Colorado, and I was expecting just to show up to Aspen and go to a hostel or somewhere until I established some accommodation for the ski season. And there was a lady at the bus, that I was talking to when I was on my way up to the mountain, and she said, "There's not a hostel in Aspen." And I was like, "Oh, really?" Stupid, ignorant Australian. And she said, and then 5 minutes later, she comes back and she says, "Listen, I just spoke to my husband. He said you can come stay with us for as long as you need to until you find your feet." And I was like, "What?" Like, I could have been an axe murderer for all she knew.
That's terrific, isn't it?
And I had these experiences all across America. I've got to say, I just absolutely love the country.
Yeah. And so did I.
Yeah.
So did I. I mean, it's just incredible. When you get to a point that you've had some achievement and you look back at it, and you start to recognize how much help that you had in getting there.
And you know what, Walter? In truth, those experiences, they have really laid a foundation for me wanting to give that same experience to other people. Absolutely. And I have done many times, and I did even when I was in Aspen. There were people that had come up for this big event out of Denver, and I met them at a show. And there was like 6 of them, and they didn't have anywhere to stay. They were going to sleep in their car, and I was like, "Nah, forget it. Come back to my place." And it gets passed on. And I remember the couple that had me at their house, and they said. And I said, "I don't know how I'm ever going to be able to repay you for this. Like, I'm just a broke ski bum at the time." And they said, "Look, you don't need to repay us. Just pass this on to someone else." And I was like, "Sure, I can do that."
Nice. Yeah, these are some great experiences to have, and it's the catalyst that makes you want to, reach back and just share it as much as you can.
Sure. Yeah. So sorry, I totally interrupted your story, but carry on. You were, I think we left off where you were talking about how you just moved from West Virginia to California, working in your father's businesses, and
what I was sharing and what I'm sharing, Matt, is just the process of how do you get from that point of having $0, what's the progression? Because I really want people to be able to see that where they are now does not have to be where they end up.
100%.
That's important to me. And I tried to write Think Red Flags, included a lot of examples of how we did it, because I think people are not as interested in my success story. There's thousands of success stories in America, but what I want to do is not impress anyone with my success story, but tell them how I did it as opposed to what I did.
Sure.
And I think that we've done that. We've done that very well.
Something I've learned a lot over the years, and I've said it a number of times on the show, but the amount of times I read a lot of books, and in truth, I probably went through a phase where I was reading too many books because I was getting into information paralysis.
Yes.
And I would read a book, I would put it down, I'd pick the next book up, I'd read it, and then I'd forget. I wouldn't apply what I've learned out of that original book, and I would go straight on to the next thing, and I was just trying to get the numbers up. In truth, I've learned probably only over the last 3 or 4 years that it's better to read a book, take your time with it, take things from it, apply it, and then move on to the next thing. It's like starting the reading of the book itself is kind of the first part of the process of unpacking and implementing. So I love the point I'm trying to make is I love when you come across books that have frameworks in it, and they have how-tos and they have instruction, practical things that you can apply instead of necessarily having to try and figure it out for yourself, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it is nice when you can go, I can just plug and play this Yeah, cool.
Yeah, well, I hope that we were able to communicate is that red flagging is a mindset and it's a thought process that you don't have to remember first, second, third, fourth step. It's intuitive. If you walk into a convenience store and there is a man standing at a counter with a large coat and a hoodie and it's 90 degrees outside, he has his hand underneath the coat. Your intuition, your instincts immediately should kick in that something is wrong with this picture.
He's got a fever.
You don't have to think about it. It's just, it's a gut feeling that you get. Now you have to make a decision on, am I going to retreat or am I going to just ignore it and walk up to the counter? The same thing applies in business.
Right.
That when you see a potential problem, it gives you that opportunity to flag it and address it. Red flagging is not something that's done with all aspects of your business. What I try to do is talk to people about those components in your business that you must get right in order to succeed. That's not everything. You can make mistakes.
Sure.
But there are some mistakes from which you cannot recover. I was in the import business. If I was a small business, if I was bringing in 2 containers of products and costing me $250,000 to do it, and the products get to America and we open the container and the product is not exactly what the client is expecting, which means I've already paid for the goods, I've paid for the shipping, I'm about to lose my profit, my cost of goods. Mm-hmm. That kind of hit, most small businesses can't take those hits too many times. So what do you do? What process do you apply? How do you think about it in order to assure that you're going to have a successful outcome? That's what red flagging is designed to do.
So let's unpack this a bit. And I love the whole concept around the mindset, because I know sometimes in business you get sort of stuck in this polarized tunnel of doing what you're doing. And sometimes the peripherals get a bit blurred and you don't always, some of those red flags aren't always obvious until they pass, and in which case it's too late. So I'd love to hear a little bit about this whole mindset conversation and how you've learned to address that over the years.
Yeah. If you look at a business plan, your business plan, if you're starting a new business, or even if you're in business and you want to make sure that you stay on course with those plans, the questions that are asked are the kind of the what if questions. And I think NASA is one of the most astute organizations at red flagging. And red flagging is a very common term, is used because it means caution. It means pay more attention to something, beware of something that could possibly cause harm. So when you do that, it allows you to identify those areas. For example, we had a situation where a customer asked us to deliver 750,000 products for a motion picture opening in 7 days. It's almost impossible to do that. You're talking about manufacturing a printed product. You cannot afford a single mistake, not one, in order to do it. We had talked about the process for years and taught it in my company, so that my staff got to a point where they automatically understood the mindset of, what do I have to make sure I do? Well, the first phase of it is, since we are not the manufacturers and we're the agents, we have to make certain that the communication to the manufacturer is 100% clear. Mm-hmm. There's no time for a mistake. And then we have to have the approvals from the legal department based on what our understanding is that we can go forward with it. After doing those first 2 red flag steps, the next thing was, how do we we can't produce it overseas, so we had to produce it local. Impossible to do that in 7 days. Mm-hmm. So we found a local supplier that we had experience with. That was another aspect that was important. He was credible supplier. And we actually were able to go out into the factory and witness the production. That was a red flag step.
Right.
So over the weekend, we produced 750,000 pieces. The next part of the red flag thinking comes from experience. It says, okay, we have to deliver to 287 locations. What if we get an address wrong? What if a zip code is off? So we make sure that the address that the customer gives us comes directly from the customer, and we don't have to retype that information because there's room for error.
Mm-hmm.
So it comes to us in a format that we can convert it to a label. So you start to see where the process is how you think. It can change if you're talking about a service business, if you're talking about from a product delivery business. But for this business, we were in the print business. So these were the steps taken. And then once you make certain of that, now you want to make sure that the count is right going to each location. So you don't have New York's order going to Chicago and Chicago's order going to Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's a matter of asking, well, what can go wrong? And a lot of it has to do with your experience that you had. And that's where we were talking about mentors. It's really important if you're in business or going into business to consult with people who've already done it, consult with people who are in the business. Even if it's not an exact business and it's a new idea, you can consult with someone if it's a similar business and some of the aspects of it are the same.
Sure.
So that's an example of how we red flag projects.
So that story to me sounds like, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, or realign me if I'm heading in the wrong direction here. But in my experience within business, in my businesses, we're methodical on process these days, and that came about from a change in my mindset, basically, where I knew that I had to, if I wanted to deliver something with consistency across the organization, I had to have processes that people could follow to make sure that happened, right?
Exactly.
Now, that happened after I was like, my mindset was in the right place about that, because for years I fought it. And I know there's a lot of viewers and listeners out there today that would be in that same boat. They'd be fighting that whole conversation around process. But I mean, what we're talking about here, I suppose, Walter, today is in reality, and you're living proof of it, I suppose, is the fact that if you do ever want to be in a position where you can potentially remove yourself from your business, then you're going to need to have process in place that can eliminate some of these obstacles. Now, so that story that you told me sounds to me like it's a lot, as much as it may have started from a mindset conversation. It sounded to me like straight up project management. Like you guys just had a really thought out, methodical approach to delivering that product, which was a step-by-step checklist. Do this, and then it all happened. And well, what was the final story actually? Did it all go to plan? You didn't tell us.
Yeah, we delivered all 750,000 products in 7 days without a single error.
Wow.
Now, what that means is, yes, you get the brag points, but what you also get is a very profitable transaction.
Sure.
Because you lost no money on it. And it happens all the time in our industry where mistakes are made. The 200 products that were supposed to go to Chicago went to Alabama. Now you have to reroute those products. So
Sure.
You have two issues. You're probably going to miss the in-hands date that the customer wanted it, and it's going to cost you additional dollars. The client's not going to pay the cost, so that comes out of your margin. We had one of the highest margins in our industry because we had less than a 0.5% error rate.
What about, how do you manage things that are out of your hands? For example, you can go ahead and you have this, you project manage this awesome product to be created 750,000 times. You've got control over that to a degree, but then all of a sudden you've got to rely on FedEx to deliver it. So what does that conversation look like from a project management perspective?
Well, I think any process or red flag system, the way we do it, is designed to reduce the possibility of mistakes. It doesn't eliminate it.
Sure.
You can't eliminate mistakes.
Sure.
We had a shipment once. It was going to a client in Florida at a hotel, and it was time sensitive. We delivered on time, but the hotel worker, it was a weekend, he wanted to go home early. So when the shipment got there, he didn't take the shipment and give it to the customer. He put the shipment on the table and went home. And the meeting was the next morning, so the client didn't get the goods.
Right.
So you see what I'm saying? There's nothing that you're going to do about that. What we write about for business is not eliminating all errors, because that would really stifle the business progress. You can't try to eliminate everything. That's too cautious. Okay. We're trying to eliminate those mistakes from which you can't recover. You'll probably experience this. I tell this story of how my 16-year-old daughter, at one time, this is some years ago, of course, she's no longer 16, but she said to me, I was giving her one of my dad talks, as you will eventually be doing. And she said, Dad, my sister and I, we know that you don't want us to make mistakes, but my sister and I are going to have to make our own mistakes, as we grow up. And I said, sweetheart, I'm not trying to keep you from making mistakes. I'm trying to keep you from making mistakes from which you cannot recover.
Right.
That's my job as your dad. So, go ahead with the mistakes, but here are the big ones. As that applies to business, I'm trying to help entrepreneurs not make those mistakes from which they can't recover.
So what about if we start at sort of, I know it's quite general, and what areas do we look into in order to pinpoint some of those larger mistakes? Like where do you start essentially? Like you say, the smaller ones, sure, not as critical, but then what's the framework or what's the process around understanding, well, what are some of the things that we need to make sure we dial in? Otherwise, this will bury us.
I think that there's two things that I want to comment on with that. One is I wrote in the book enough examples so that people could get a clear vision of what we're talking about. But they have to, for example, if you have a business plan and the business plan says, my product will do X, Y, Z, whatever that service or product is. It's a good idea. It came from my mind or myself and my partner, and we're enthusiastic about it because we think this is a terrific idea. And we're going to run forward, which entrepreneurs do, race forward to develop a business, raise for capital, and market this idea. The first red flag in that is, can you deliver that product or service to do exactly what you tell the consumer it's going to do for them? Mm-hmm. Okay, that's the first red flag. That's a big one because obviously anything that is that important, you're not going to have success selling a service that people don't want, right. A service that doesn't have value, a product that doesn't have value. So the red flag process is very elementary, but I can give you numerous examples from my experience with both very successful entrepreneurs in the billionaire status to starting out entrepreneurs, fellows who had no capital, how they totally ignored validating the product.
Right.
Because it was a good idea to them and it sounded like a good idea, but they had never confirmed that it did exactly what they claimed it would do. And that applies to any business, not just.
It sounds like something I've heard before, called the shiny object syndrome, something I'm quite guilty of. I think, as you say, entrepreneurs, we do this. We just come up with these great ideas or what we think are great ideas when in reality, it kind of derails you from what your actual direction should be. It's good to have, and I've learned this and I've recently, and I've spoken about this on a couple of recent podcasts, we've recently employed a framework into the organization where the whole team now understands and the whole team, in truth, decides what the goal and what the trajectory is of the business for the next year in order to reach our 3 and 10 year targets. And they design the key outcomes that need to be achieved for us to get there. And then they design their own key outcomes in order for those business outcomes to get done. Mm-hmm. So it keeps them in track. And in truth, it gives them the ability to push back when myself, for example, says, hey, Maddie, can you go and do this? I need this done by Friday. And she'll say, well, hang on a sec. This sounds good, but it's not part of my scorecard. So how about we put this on the shelf for the next quarter? And I'm like, damn it, I taught her this and she's right. But anyway, the point being, and we see this a lot with businesses that we typically work with trade businesses, contractors, and like a shiny object syndrome for them may be something like, oh, let's add this to our services. We're going to bolt this on, or we want to add this new product into what we're delivering our clients and that kind of thing. They do it because maybe they've seen a competitor do it, or maybe they've, read something about it, or maybe it's a new release product from one of their suppliers or whatever it is. But it's not really what they're good at. It's not really what their core business is. And in a way, it just detracts and dilutes the amount of resource they can be applying to what they are actually good at. So I'm guessing that's kind of a similar thing.
Yes, it is.
Mm.
Yeah, it is. There are, a lot of examples that I've cited where different entrepreneurs. One was a really interesting one because you would think that being able to sell to the big box stores like a Home Depot or Walmart, right away you think, boy, this is it. I've succeeded. I've developed a product and it's on the shelf in Walmart and some of the big chains. And that is a good start. That's a beginning. And I have a dear friend who went from the promotions business to wanting to sell products to the big chains at retail. Totally different experience.
Sure.
Completely. Because in the promotions business, we sold branded corporate products to companies that once it was delivered and they accepted, you invoiced and you were paid. In the retail business, especially the big box business, you have to get your products on their shelves. And then you have to be prepared to do something that will crush most small business. Wait 90 to 120 days.
Exactly.
Before you're compensated. If you overlook that, that's what I call a major red flag, because that's going to have a high impact influence on your business.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, but at the end of that period, they take an inventory and all the unsold product, they expect you to take it back.
Right.
So bottom line, those are not sales. Those are consignments.
Right.
Yeah. So if they give you the space, they advertise, they get the public to come, and those are consignments. So if you go into something without really understanding that process and you're not capitalized to be able to go 120 days on a substantial purchase from a customer, you're going to have some major problems. Even if you're capitalized, you still may be undercapitalized to meet the needs of that particular client.
And how did that turn out for your friend?
Not well. not well, because you had at the end of the period this great product that he thought was going to be a big seller, wasn't a big seller because he hadn't validated it. He hadn't got in any indication that, other than a great sounding idea, that people wanted to buy the product. These things are so elementary, but what I have learned in my experience, Matt, is that if you get enough of the small things right in a business, the components, the total picture is success. The small ones won't devastate you, but if you get enough of those that you're not doing well, they become a major impact on your business. So anyone listening would probably wonder, well, how do I start doing this? Within an hour session, it's very hard to share exactly what I suggest they not only read my book, but other books that are similar to this subject.
I know we discussed offline that, that conversation, what's the difference between a matrix and a process?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that conversation around matrix would be applicable to what you've just talked about here, where you might have this great idea, but when you plug it into the matrix, does it actually spit out a green light at the end of it?
Yeah. Well, the matrix was something that I think it's chapter 7, where I interviewed, because for the book, I interviewed 6 different entrepreneurs. Tom Sims was very successful in the restaurant business. He has 150 restaurants. And there's a chapter, it's called Mimi's Restaurants. There's a chapter in the book just on Tom Smith. And for anyone who is interested in the restaurant business, but also other people should read it, because a lot of the principles that he applied are the same.
Sure.
And he was the one that used, if you're going to have multiple locations, then you have to have a very concise, he called it his matrix. Customer comes into the door, first of all, to make sure that there's a clean front. So when the customer comes, this is a food business. So you don't want fingerprints and smears on the front door glass when they come in.
Right.
That was a part of his matrix. He wanted every single restaurant to have the same look.
Right.
McDonald's and all the others, they do the same thing. The customer comes in, you want someone to greet them quickly and warmly, seat them, and then serve them quickly. Serve hot food hot, cold food cold. So he had these principles that he applied to every single business. Now, the red flagging is sort of an overlay of that process. It's some things that you are not going to be able to tell someone step by step to do.
Sure.
So you want them to learn to think about these things themselves and develop the right mindset for service.
So the red flag.
Yeah, so they learn to ask the question, what do I do to make sure this customer has a great experience so they'll come back?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And I know there's a lot of a lot of listeners and viewers right now would be listening, watching this and saying, this is what we've done to, especially for a lot of the home service businesses. Some of these guys have got some really great processes or some matrices, if you want, where they're really dialing in that customer experience. They rock up to the house and people are expecting a plumber to come to their house that probably shows up in a shabby looking pickup truck and, got a coffee in one hand and a cigarette in the other and a uniform with blue glue all over it. And so, these guys have got these really great processes in place where, they are almost showing up as a blue collar worker with a white collar sort of appearance, very clean shaven, very clean cut, very neat, presentable, speaks well. They've got little booty things they can put over their shoes so they don't track mud through houses, and little mats they can put their toolbox on, and all these kind of things, it's a very thought out process. And some of these guys do it really well, and it's great to see. And we even recently, we had a couple of electricians out to my place here, and one of the guys came out, run some cable, and they were the kind of that first type of business, if you will, the guys that sort of rocked up in the van. It was shabby, it was run down, coffee in one hand kind of thing. This was, mind you, must have been 6 weeks ago, and I still haven't seen an invoice for this job. The guys were here for maybe 4 hours. They still haven't seen an invoice. I had another electrician come out the week after to change some lights. He came out very professional, very well presented, had the whole process down, introduced at the door, had his COVID safe policy, which he presented, had his iPad there, walked around, did his safety audit check, and then, at the end of it, invoiced me right there and then. I paid him right there and then. He left, and I was just thinking, wow, what a contrast within two businesses. And he was a small business. He was just him, and he had his apprentice working with him, a young guy, but, quite switched on. And this other guy was a really well-established local business that's been operating for 20 years. And I suspect that's probably part of the problem, because they've been doing something for so long and it's been working, so they think, for so long, but they haven't really got any perspective on how to do things better, probably largely due to what you addressed, I think, in the opening paragraph of this entire podcast, which was, if, essentially, and I'm paraphrasing, but you don't change if it's not for the people you meet and the books you read, and getting exposure to people that are doing things differently, and call them mentors or call them colleagues or whatever you want. It doesn't really matter, but you've just got to be open to ways to do things better and optimize.
Yeah, absolutely. I learned a lot of my experience, one from my dad starting out, and then the businesses that I went into in later years. I had my first company at 24, and then around 36 or so, at 35, I had another business, another company. And there were always people that either I started to do some work with them, for them, to learn the nuances of the business as I did the promotions business. And so that I could tune into the experience through intuition. I didn't just learn these things from making mistakes. One of the best ways to learn is from someone else's experience, because I always say that the three ways we learn, and I talk about that, the three ways we learn is, school, reading, formal education. We learn from our own personal experience, and we learn from other people's experience. We learn from mentors, which is going to work for someone else that gives you the experience. The 6 entrepreneurs that I wrote about in my book, they have some commonalities between them. They all worked for someone, and they're all in different businesses. One's a real estate investor. The other one is Tom Sims, the restaurant owner. One is in marketing and promotions. And they all had experience in working for someone so that they could develop that learning curve and recognize the red flags before they did it themselves. That's not
Sure.
always possible when you're talking about small businesses, especially if it's a new idea.
And in truth, I think a lot of small businesses, and if I'm honest, probably my own small business, was kind of started out of a frustration from working within another company that was just doing something that I thought was just so stupid. Like it drove me nuts, like doing things the way they wanted to do. I thought there's just no way. Like there's so much, and it wasn't. I didn't go into competition or anything against this company, but I just thought if I could start a company that did this bit better, then, and this is, they were a well-established organization, but I thought if I could start a company that targets this vertical with this sort of process, with these different processes, it'd be a whole different ball game. And I think a lot of businesses are like that. Like they might be working, there might be an apprentice plumber, or there might be a plumber that's working for a company, and they just think, why would they do this way? And why won't they change it? Why won't they adapt? Why won't they evolve? Knowing that they've got friends and colleagues that are doing something so much more efficient, so much more streamlined, over here. And very often that's that forces them to go and start their own business. And for better or worse, I should quantify, like it's not, I think a lot of business owners do go into business thinking that because they're good at insert trade, they're going to be a good business owner, which is very seldom the case. Like there's right. Two different conversations, but regardless, and especially here in Australia, you get a lot of people fresh out of college and they think, I'm just going to go start a business. Because in college, they teach you, well, when you finish your course, we give you earn your license and then you can go start a business. But of course, they don't actually teach you how to run a business, which is one of the reasons why I have a podcast, in truth.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah,
if you start when you're in business or starting a business, if you ask the questions, what are the things that I need to really get right in order to have a success of this? If it's a business that is not, one like yours or you and I having this conversation doesn't require a large staff, of people, but if it does require others, then you have to get, and this is important, other people have to buy into your concept of service. If you have a restaurant, if you have an online business and people have to call, and your team has to buy into your idea of service. And if you have people who are not, that becomes a flag and it becomes a real pain point in a business, because your people will not be giving the service that you described in your mission statement. You know how everyone writes a beautiful mission statement of what they're going to do and what they're going to be to the market. But then the execution of that falls short because now they have to get others to execute it. And if you don't take the time to do the training, to more or less sell your passion and share your passion with your team so that they can see the benefit for them and their future as well, that can become a major problem. So these are the things that you flag in a business. Those things that are important that will cause major pain points if you don't do it well.
So I love that concept, and that's something we've been really big on the last few years is helping, internally communicating to the team how they can achieve their goals or whatever through the business achieving its goals, and communicating that through things like organizational charts and these new scorecard system that we've adopted and all these kind of things. Like it really does build a bit of it makes that path a lot more obvious to them, and it can show them the road to success a lot more. And I think we've had this conversation a lot in the past with businesses that struggle to not only find but certainly retain and keep employees. And one of the big red flags that we've noticed is businesses that go out there and they're recruiting for team members based on like an hourly rate or something like that, as opposed to, and normally they get, they'll get quite a lot of inquiries into that position, but their retention's not always that great. And the reason being, in a lot of cases, is because it might be a decent hourly rate. The culture of the business might not be very good, and that's only discovered once the employee starts working there. And more to the point, and this position that I was in, I mean, you were talking about learning red flags from working in other companies, like having no clear path, no foresight as to what that career development might look like, that career opportunity might look like, where you could potentially end up within that organization. And I think by nature, typically us as humans, we we do want to see progress. Like we want to be able to see, well, if I can do this, this, and this, then I'm going to be in a position where I can be a manager or whatever it might be. And, you know, or I might be able to learn new skills, and I might be able to, you know, train people underneath me and all these kind of things. But like being able to communicate that to people is very often the difference between them, you know, going for someone that's paying them an extra couple of bucks an hour as to, you know, you who's offering them a really clearly defined career path.
Absolutely. No, that's a very good point, and that's exactly what I was saying.
Yeah, and so I'd love to hear a little bit more about how, you know, how you've done that in your businesses, and what that conversation looks like with team members, and how, you know, how you've basically rolled that out. Because I've kind of given you a bit of insight as to how we've done it, and maybe it's the same, maybe it's not.
First of all, we have. I had an excellent HR person who eventually became president of the company.
Oh wow! And there's the career. There's the career path from HR to president.
Exactly, because she was well organized, was able to grasp all the concepts. As a matter of fact, she was the one that documented all the red flagging processes. Sure. And taught it to the staff. And I think that all of our employees, one of the things we talked about, because when you're in a small business, you can't paint a big picture of success for them, because obviously everyone can't become president. But we did have plans to branch out, to take on other categories of service, and everyone who had shown the right skill set and what we taught were the leaders in doing that. Mm-hmm. But when you're in a small business, for example, if you have a small restaurant, it's kind of hard to get people to see a vision of where they're going. Other than one of the things that I taught and that the president of our company taught was the idea of excellence, developing a habit of excellence. And if you're going to work in our company, you have to have that as an objective, so that whatever you do in your future endeavors, you will have a model that you've developed that you can follow. We're going to teach the red flagging process. We're going to teach you how to be efficient. And this is what you can do with us. But this is what, even in the bigger picture of your life, that is going to give you, if you move to something else, or if you eventually start a business. Okay. And so that's pretty much how we covered that. That's it.
I love that, because there's so many. That's often a big pushback when we have that conversation with people. They're like, well, I mean, what is their potential for, you know, for moving up in the business? Other than, I mean, we're running a plumbing company with 10 plumbers. You know, there's one dispatch manager, there's an office purpose person in the office, there's me, and then there's 7 techs. Right. You know, like. And so that's a really good.
Yeah. If you know, and we tell people, if that's something that appeals to you, this is the right place for you to work. And if it's not, you don't want to come to work here.
Sure.
You know, because we require service excellence. We require an understanding of our red flag process, because that's something that no one is going to take away from you. It's not a red flag process for our business. It's a way of thinking that you'll be able to take with you anywhere you go. Yeah. You'll have it on a resume. You can talk about that to any owner of a business, and you will most likely get a job. If you can show that kind of experience and that kind of a mindset, people will want to hire you.
And I think as well that sort of ties back into that mindset conversation a lot, doesn't it? With having people on board that are willing to and are keen to embrace better ways of doing things. Like it's so often, and I've seen it, and we've all seen it, you know, we've been in this situation. And very often we come across this situation in our own businesses after we discover this resolution or this revelation ourselves, where in order, like, so, and we see this a lot with businesses that are, you know, on the development path. So maybe they've been operating for a few years, and now all of a sudden they're like, we really want to grow and scale our business. Maybe they've got a business coach on board. Maybe they're reading your book or whatever it might be. And they're like, I need to get better at this, this, and this. So they've had that revelation. Then the problem is when they try to communicate this to their team members, who maybe they've got staff that have been in their business for 10 years, maybe they've got 20 years of experience, and they're very stuck in their ways, and they're very not willing to change. And that can lead to a huge cultural problem in the business, because they've got this highly respected technician or whatever, a guy in the business that's been doing it for so long, and everyone knows him in the team and everyone looks up to him. But he's not willing to change and he's not willing to, the one rotten apple kind of thing. We've had clients, the colleagues of ours, that have literally had to sack their most profitable salesperson or their most experienced technician based on the fact that them being in that business was starting to bring the culture of the whole organization down, despite the fact they were responsible for selling more than anyone.
Yeah. Well, that has happened. Hey, it didn't happen in, never had the direct experience, but I know of companies where that has happened.
It's very common, I suppose, in the building industry when you've got people that have been doing something for so long and doing it a certain way, and you're bringing them into an organization which has processes and has operating procedures, and they have ways of doing things which deliver a result based on consistency, which may not align with the way that this other person's been doing it, and the other person not willing to change means that the results are good and the output is different. And you know what I mean? And so that's where we see it occurring quite a bit. And it sort of ties into that whole, hire for attitude, not experience kind of conversation, which I think is true to a degree. I think if you've got a good hiring process down, then you can kind of eliminate a lot of those obstacles along the way. But sometimes you find yourself in the thick of it.
Yes, absolutely. There's so much that I could cover. There's so much that I could cover with you and share with your listeners. There's just not enough time to do it in this session. But I hope I've covered enough things in the book that it will really be helpful to people. Asking questions, the what if questions. For example, in our mission statement, we talked about the service that we were going to provide, the level of service that we were going to provide, because we're a highly competitive business. What's going to make people come back to us instead of to our competitors? And it's one thing to make that statement, and then you walk into companies, the larger clients that we had, we saw on banners all over their walls about customer first, the customer service. But then there's the issue of how do you know you're providing the service that you described in your mission statement? How do you monitor that? How do I know that that's factual? Because if it is, it's going to draw people back to me, and I'm going to continue to do more business. Mm-hmm. So we developed a thing called the True Blue. The name of the company was Icon Blue. So we developed a True Blue reward process.
Very Australian, True Blue.
And a True Blue moment was when you service the customer to a point where they were so motivated by your service that they send you an email and they say, Allison, great job. Thank you so much for getting this to me on time. The product is great. I love it. Anytime, because people don't do that. I mean, they order something from you, you send it to them, they're happy with it, they don't respond for the most case. Sure. But if you gave them extraordinary service to a point that they send you a note, an email, then that's how we would measure each one of our client's service personnel had to receive True Blue notes within a 30-day period, or we were reviewing their service process. And we had a wall in the company called the True Blue Wall. And there were notes and comments all over this huge wall of comments that people have gotten. And every single member of our team was proud to have their compliment posted on that wall.
That's awesome. I love that whole gamifying something like that. Like it makes it fun, like it's a fun thing to do I've got a similar thing with our developers. We say, like we run, customer satisfaction surveys, and it's actually part of their KPIs, like they've got to maintain a customer satisfaction survey response of over 92%. And it gamifies it because they're always trying to improve it and tweak it. And they're really happy when they get it. And it's great to see.
Yeah, yes. Absolutely. So, it's a compilation of obviously of things. There's no magic answer to success in business, but I can tell all of your listeners that success is intentional. It does not just happen.
Sure.
You put together enough of the basics, understand and recognize what they are, what are the important things you have to do, so you're not trying to overmanage your affairs, and focus on the things that are important that generate revenue, have efficiencies so that you generate profit, not just revenue, and hopefully it'll get you where you want to go.
So just for you guys out there watching this or listening to this, I'm speaking with Walter Hill Jr., He has a book called Think Red Flags, and you can get hold of that book over on Amazon, and I'm going to post some links to that within the show notes. So if you're driving, listening to this, you don't have to pull over and write it down. Just head to the show notes over at thesiteshed.com and you can get access to that. Walter, you also have a website, which is Walter Hill Jr., as in jr.com. So if you guys out there want to go check that out, by all means, go ahead. Mate, thank you so much for your time. It's been a true blue experience. I wish you all the success with your book. I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will be a bestseller.
Yeah, the same to you, Matt. And your program is wonderful. I really appreciate you having me on.
You bet. It's a pleasure talking to you, and look forward to some future conversations. Hopefully. Otherwise, that's a wrap.
Terrific.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Toolbox Talks. If you're liking what you hear, then you can head across to thesiteshed.com, where you can join our community by signing up to our Toolbox Talks. You'll get sent a weekly notification, which is basically a highlight of everything that we've spoken about during that week, along with any other industry news that may be relevant or specific to the trades. If you're enjoying the show, you can head across to iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, where you can leave us a review. That would be fantastic, and all the reviews get read out in the show. Likewise, if you have any friends or colleagues that you think would benefit from the show and the episodes that we create, then please go ahead and share it with them.